Okay, excellent. So, we're delighted to have with us today Jesse Cohn, Crossroads class of 1990, and author of a number of books. We'll get to those or one of them shortly. But um, Jesse, you are very well entrenched in the academic world now. Did you know that was going to happen when you were at Crossroads?
No. I thought that I wanted to be the next great science fiction writer. And while I was in college, I had noticed that I really liked my English classes and said, okay, well, I could be an English professor as my day job,
Hmm.
and it just kind of took over. So here I am.
Well, it wasn't one giant leap. Tell us a little bit more about the steps to get there.
Well, so yeah, I remember particularly thinking, okay, maybe I could do this for a living. One day after my literary theory class as an undergrad, we had an assignment where we had to take turns explaining to the rest of the class some difficult theory, and mine was deconstruction, and I somehow managed to get something across about it that was well received, and I thought, oh well, maybe I could do this.
That's terrific. Well, before we get into underground passages, um, can you tell us where you're teaching now and what you're teaching?
I'm teaching at Purdue Northwest. I teach English, so that in practice means teaching a lot of composition and some courses in popular culture. So I've taught comics, science fiction, American humor, that kind of thing, film.
I think you may have the dream job for a number of people.
It kind of is in a lot of ways. There's some definite drawbacks, but I do count myself lucky.
So underground passages, I your writing style is to me complex. Maybe not to you, but there's a lot in there. So before I get to anything specific, can you tell us in general what it's about and what you wanted the reader to get from it?
So I set out to write a book about anarchist resistance culture. Resistance culture is my name for the kind of art that anarchists made. Visual art, song, film, dance, and poetry, and so forth. That sort of created a counterculture, right? That allowed them to resist being assimilated into the everyday world of capitalism and the state. It sort of let them keep a kind of distance from the rest of the world.
There's a line I'm seeing here in the book. You say Walter B. Rideout takes just 2 pages to consider the literary production of anarchists. And so how does this work? The artistic connection with anarchists?
Um, the artistic connection with anarchists. Yeah, so right out kind of writes off the that resistance culture. He says, why didn't they produce any novels? Which isn't accurate. There's some great anarchist novels. Manuel Rojas from Chile
Mhm.
wrote an especially profound one, which the English translation is translated as "Born Guilty," but the Spanish title is "Hijo de Ladrón," the
Hmm,
son of the thief.
interesting.
Um,
Well,
yeah,
you write considerably about South Africa and resistance there, and it was
so South
really
America,
enlightening
you
for
mean?
me. Pardon?
South America, you mean?
Well, also South Africa with apartheid.
Uh,
Um,
yeah.
let's see. I've got some- and these are just you know passages I took out. I've got First, the anarchist conception of resistance is, with all due respect to the astounding trials undergone by South African anti-apartheid movement, something different and broader. Maybe I misinterpreted this.
Yes, okay. Yeah, the anti-apartheid activists in South Africa did also use that term, resistance culture. So I'm sort of apologizing for borrowing the term.
Well, I just find it interesting because um, in so many ways, I looked at the uh, anti-apartheid movement in South Africa as being similar to the civil rights movement in the United States, in kind of collective action. And what you wrote about, the threads of anarchy within that, I thought was really interesting because, yeah, there is that tie of resistance, um, which I really had not thought about.
Sure.
And um, so. Let's see, because I lost the main document I had for notes, but
Oh,
um, you say primary question animating this book. How has anarchist resistance, global both in its aspirations and in its movement, been translated into the local vernacular of particular cultures and historical situations? Um, and can you expand a little on that?
yeah. So on the one hand, there's a lot about anarchist resistance culture that is very, very sort of consistent across the globe. So that you'll find Italian anarchists in Paterson, New Jersey,
Mm,
using sometimes the same images as their Japanese counterparts, right? At the same time on the other side of the world. And at the same time, though, there's a lot of local variation. So that, for instance, in China, the anarchists they're really liked to focus on critiques of the patriarchal family because that was felt as one of their main sources of oppression. Whereas it's less emphasized in other places.
right, right. So uh, another thing I really like about the book is that you seem to um, be able to write about anarchy without in a very analytical way. So it's not like you're saying, "Well, this is everybody should become an anarchist or nobody should."
Mm.
Um, do you think does anarchy go back to the beginning of humankind?
Uh, First of all, everybody should,
Like,
for sure. I'm an anarchist, and
okay,
I'll admit that I got too close to my material. Yeah. Is it something that's sort of pan historical? That's an interesting argument. You know, in some ways, I lean more and more these days towards a yes answer, and I think that actually marks some of the limits of this book. When I wrote it, I was really concentrating on movements and people that had ties back to the anarchist movement as was conceived from the mid 19th century in Europe. That spread to places like Korea, Japan, China, Australia. I think that's still actually a fairly limited way of thinking about it. So there's a group in South America called Mujeres Creando, creating women, who are anarchist in their orientation. And one of their members famously said that we are not anarchists by Bakunin or the CNT, and the anarchist union in Spain in the 30s. We're anarchists by our grandmothers, right? And that anarchism by our grandmothers has a much richer and deeper history.
that is interesting. Yeah, but if I heard you correctly, you just allowed the label to be placed on you as an anarchist. Is that right?
Yes.
So how do you retain a day job as an anarchist?
Yeah. So that's the trick, right? With the dilemma that anarchists in all times and places are placed in, at least under capitalism in the state, is how do I survive under capitalism in the state when there's not a revolution going on, right? In a revolutionary wintertime,
Right.
and still stay true to myself and my principles. There, there's a an anecdote that I tell about a Yiddish speaking anarchist who once asked Peter Kropotkin, this great Russian anarchist, Sie mega an anarchist haben a Bankpickel. Can an anarchist have a bank book, a bank account? Is
What a
that
great
allowed?
question.
Right?
Well, what was was the American Civil War in some ways an act of anarchy?
No. What in what sense actually would it be?
Well, defying authority.
The South define
Right.
authority? Oh
Mhm.
God, no. I mean the South, the Confederate States of America, their entire project was to preserve the right to absolutely dominate other human beings as if they were a different species. Right? That's as far in the opposite corner from anarchism
Okay.
as you can get.
And there's a great quote I've got down here a little further from you about, dominating one, dominating another, and another, and another. Um, I'll get it exactly in a bit. Um, the, I love you used a term I had not been familiar with, all capitals, TINA, Tina. There is no alternative.
Yes, that's Margaret
Can you
Thatcher.
say a little more about that?
Margaret Thatcher coined that acronym, right? As that was her way of essentially saying that there is no alternative to capitalism. The socialist parties of Europe and of Britain have no future, right? Because capitalism has won.
So, are there any parts of the planet where you think anarchy is more prevalent now than elsewhere?
Oh goodness. Well, there are a couple places where something very like an anarchist experiment is ongoing. The, uh, the places I would call attention to are Chiapas in Mexico, where the Zapatistas, well, not calling themselves anarchists, have nonetheless managed to defend this particular space, and within it to conduct this incredible kind of experiment in self-governance and a kind of rudimentary socialism. The other grand experiment is happening, has been happening since the mid 2010s, in part what used to be part of Syria,
Hmm.
northwest Syria, the area that's called Rojava, or the West, by the Kurdish militants fighting there.
Interesting. And is that similar to the way the Kurds are organized in Iran?
Not exactly. The Kurdish movement has taken different forms in different places,
Right.
but the ones in Rojava are particularly inspired by the American anarchist Murray Bookchin, this environmental anarchist from the 60s through the 90s.
I mean, this is most interesting to me. My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that nobody wants to fight the Kurds. Is there any connection between that and considerable anarchy?
Yeah, well, they're very effective fighters,
Oh.
but in a way, everyone wants to fight them.
Hmm.
They're fought against by the Turks, the Russians, the Syrians, the various forms of Islamist extremists. They're kind of in the middle of all these crosshairs at once.
Right. But my understanding is that they're quite effective fighters and yeah. So, tell me, there's the old adage, that my right to swing my fist ends where your nose begins. Um, and so, in terms of theory of being an anarchist, how does it work that um, you're with other people and the question of whether or not you have any respect for their rights?
Well, mutual respect is foundational, and more than mutual respect, but also what's called mutual aid, a term that's actually become popular outside of the anarchist movement, which is, I think,
Okay.
delightful. During the pandemic, there were all these mutual aid groups that sprang up to sort of meet human needs. Peter Kropotkin actually coined that term back in the turn of the century, in his book Mutual Aid, a factor in evolution. He thought that human beings had evolved, and in fact that all different kinds of social species had evolved, to have the instinct to help each other, to have a mutual aid instinct, and that was what had given them an advantage in the struggle to survive. The most
So,
social species are the
right.
ones that flourish.
And in the book, you do talk about kind of that tension between individual rights and the common good. So, I mean, whenever an anarchist is in a setting with another human being, isn't there some trimming of the sails, some way in which you're not a pure anarchist?
No, I think actually you can only be a real anarchist with others,
Okay.
right? So, but so that philosophy of my fist can only go so far as where your nose begins.
Yeah.
That's kind of a rough parody of Rousseau, right?
Okay.
It's Rousseau's social contract, which says that human beings might have originally lived these solitary lives of freedom, but we had to give that up for the various advantages of civilization. But we're still kind of sad about that, because it is giving something up.
Right.
The anarchists, from the very beginning, Proudhon, Bakunin, really hated that philosophy, and said instead, freedom is not what ends when you meet another person. Freedom begins when you meet other people. My freedom, says Bakunin, is multiplied by my relations to others. Right,
Interesting. Okay.
your ability
I'm definitely
be
learning
with
more.
different.
I want this is a rather long passage, but it's the one I was talking about before in terms of kind of a chain of command almost. It's the fate of former masters and their lackeys after the revolution is, in fact, a frequent preoccupation of anarchist utopian writing. If everyone connives with the prince, as Proudhon said in 52Q, the police and army are supported by and composed of the people who elect a government that pay them. White workers conspire with their employers to exploit and humiliate their black co-workers. Bosses boss foremen who boss their subordinates, who go home and boss their wives, who boss their children, who boss smaller children, etc. So
Yeah,
um, I just found that fascinating because I don't know where the chain breaks in there. So it makes a lot of sense.
yeah. Okay, yeah. So that passage actually ends with me saying, that then a key component of anarchist dreaming is the process of reconciliation and reintegration that would constitute a society of
Yes, you do.
equals.
I'm sorry.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. So in other words, we have that's a chain that we have to break.
right.
The sort of cycle of domination and abuse that circulates among humans.
So I want to fast forward to the present if we can, and um, how does an individual retain his or her rights now with the current Donald Trump government, which I guess in its own way is somewhat anarchistic. Would I be
No,
right about that?
no.
No.
Oh my God, no. The man's an authoritarian through and through.
Right, but I mean, on the other hand, it's doing whatever it wants to.
Yes, that's tyranny. That's not anarchy.
Okay. Okay. All right.
That's what I say goes. It is a threat to any form of democracy for sure. But it ain't anarchist.
So should our focus be more on ourselves and those who we're close to, or should we be thinking in terms of a broader society?
We should think in terms of the broader society. Yeah, the key here is the idea of solidarity, right?
Okay.
Which is another name for mutual aid, right?
Okay. Yeah.
We've
Yeah.
lost a tremendous amount of kind of ambient social solidarity. The ethos of society right now is so much so fragmented, so individualist in the impoverished sense, that we find it hard to come together to find common cause. So finding ways to revive solidarity is all about where it's at right now.
Okay. So another side of your many-sided coin is popular culture, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So are there any particular characteristics of today's popular culture which you think is different from, say, when you were a teenager?
Um, yeah. Okay. Wow. That's a big, broad question.
Yeah.
Um, I, it's funny. I was
You can pass on it.
just lamenting yeah, I'm actually slated to teach a course on the postmodern short story
Hmm.
next year, and one thing that struck me is how many of these early references in postmodernism, the pop culture references, were just gone.
Hmm.
Madonna, Paul Rubens, Pee Wee Herman,
Right.
Twin Peaks, right? All these sort of icons of postmodern pop culture will go completely over my students' heads. I may have to supply a lot of references.
Right, right. I mean, I think that's one of the difficult parts of teaching is as we get older, our references mean less.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah. Um, so let me ask you one last question.
sure.
Um, looking at the whole thing, that being, the planet we live on,
Mm.
yeah, I'm not going to ask you about a doomsday clock, but I'm going to ask you if there was a pendulum which swung back and forth between optimism and pessimism. Um, can you say where you would be?
Yeah, oof. It's hard not to be a little pessimistic these days.
Yeah,
Um, I manage to resist that tendency most of the time, because I'm stubborn.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, I I uh, I don't want ever to give in to that kind of pessimism.
Thank you. Thank you. Likewise. Um, is there anything there's a lot obviously in the book that we haven't talked about, but is there anything that you want to mention that you wish we had talked about or we can?
Oh, geez, there's so much. I I would boy, I don't know where to begin. Would also love to talk about anarchist poetry, or the chapter about the anarchist image, anarchist visual art. There's so much in there. I had trouble restraining myself. Unfortunately, I found editors who were willing to let me run
Well,
long.
say more about it then. Yeah.
So the chapter about anarchist poetry sort of revolves around this one of the chapters about it revolves around this sort of question about how you place yourself in a public sphere. Is the poet sort of speaking to a broad public, or to a coterie, or to sometimes we talk about counter publics, which are neither the the grand masses, nor just a small community. The person who actually coined the term counterpublics, Michael Warner, was talking about the gay community as it emerged through acts of writing, through acts of reading, right? The formation of gay magazines and underground publications.
And you talk about visual arts as well, right?
Yes,
Mm.
yes. My favorite being the day-turned comics, comic books that are ripping off essentially mainstream characters like Tintin, and placing words in their mouths that they never would have said. It's delightfully subversive.
That's great. I mean, Jesse, you give me hope because you just, I mean, with your energy and what you're, communicating to others makes me feel really good.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So, again, before wrapping it up, is there anything about anything you'd want to say?
Sure. Could I put in a plug for my organization?
Absolutely.
Right. So I'm actually wearing the shirt for the Institute for Anarchist Studies. Um, the Institute for Anarchist Studies, IAS, funds research on this stuff. From histories like mine to very very concrete kinds of experiments in living.
Where is it based?
It's based in the U.S., mainly in Portland,
Interesting.
but members are scattered all over the place.
I'll put, a slide in the video, with the URL address, etc.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.